Imagine, you just finished college in a field you were passionate about. You have an opportunity offered to you to pursue the career you wanted. Unfortunately, you weren't able to get it. There was no real backup plan to get your foot in the door. So now you're left with one question nobody wants to ask about their life. What now? This is one of the many examples of what a midlife crisis is like. That was one of my experiences myself. As you grow older, there are going to be times where you will question where you currently are and what you can do to elevate your life. A topic that gets spoken about in animation in one or maybe two episodes at most, but very rarely do we talk about in detail throughout an entire series. Though today, I feel that we should talk about one of those shows that really presents how a midlife crisis can affect a person. Tuca and Bertie. Tuca and Bertie as a show fits the criteria for people that could easily fall into the trap of a midlife crisis. First is that the majority of the cast is around their mid-20s and early 30s. Second is the struggles of pursuing a career. Third is dealing with the difficulties of finding a significant other or taking the next step in a long-term relationship. Finally, fourth is trying to overcome the financial challenges that are catching up to you overall. All of these points can put a lot of pressure into wanting to achieve more than what you have in life. It brings out a lot of anxiety and stress you created for yourself that make you feel you're not going anywhere and there needs to be a change quickly in order for the needle to be moved. But that has consequences. Tuca and Bertie play that to perfection. So let's look at how Tuca and Bertie present these pieces that build a midlife crisis. So I remember when I was younger and my mom was in my 30s. I'd always teased her about it, calling her middle-aged. She would always get defensive about it, and now I understand why. Not just from personal experiences, but also with how we see how age comes into play within the series. This is a bit of a generalization of the other problems that we're getting into. However, the biggest thing is that the older you get, the heavier the choices could impact your livelihood. It feels like society pushes you to make a decision quickly because of the expectation of being a success or settled at that current age, whatever that means. One example will have to be Tuca's interaction with her aunt. Now, understanding Tuca, she isn't a person who hasn't accomplished a whole lot in life considering societal standards. However, she is someone who is extroverted and always wanting to have fun. So a lot of her money comes from mooching off her aunt, an aunt that is incredibly rich and successful. So this situation is coming from the episode Plumage in Season 1. This episode dives into the past of Bertie as well as the origins of her family. Tuca's relationship with her aunt is very one-sided. While yes, it's good to have a family member feel so willing to help you in your situation, oftentimes there are some comments that belittles the person receiving the money. We see that with how Aunt Tallulah treats Tuca and her viewpoint of Tuca's childhood life growing up. With her mother dying at a very young age, a lot of the kids had to grow up quickly and dispersed. While plenty of them settled down or pursued successful careers, Tuca wasn't as lucky with finding a career to pursue or a partner to call her own, which is why she heavily relies on her aunt to gain a steady income to have her own place, which gives Tallulah ammo to dog on Tuca's situation. So with that, how would someone deal with a person who is constantly devaluing you as a person? Well, from what we know, alcohol. Prior to the series starting, we found out that Tuca cuts that out of her life, so that was probably how she was able to deal with her aunt's verbal abuse. In this episode, she plays a facade by pretending to indulge in alcohol because she still values her aunt very much and doesn't want to ruin the vibes. It shows the dynamic of how much control and influence one person could have as you get older. There are a lot of family members especially that will take note of what you weren't able to achieve compared to what they've done around the same age. So there's a ton of belittling that can be endured and can easily mess with one's head, which at boiling point can lead you into dealing with rash decisions. A decision that was met when Aunt Tallulah decided to talk down to her mother.
That woman put nothing but positivity and love in this world for the brief time that she was in it.
And what did that get her? No career, no man, and you ended up just like her.
I never asked you for anything. I came to see you. You can keep the money.
So tearing up that check has a lot of symbology to it. Ripping that check is cutting off those ties from an individual's power, breaking the leash that a person has to hold you back, and willing to go into the unknown of fighting steady income. Obviously, common sense would say that Tuca was 100% in the right. There's only so much verbal harassment you can take from a person who continues to send money your way. It goes to show how important it is to do things for people without having some sort of jab and shame on the individual receiving the kind gesture. Even with that, she didn't have a solid enough plan and will need to rely on a multitude of obscure jobs in order to pay rent. It just becomes more difficult and could be at risk of homelessness. The sudden emotional decision has those higher risks. Having to make a decision to go away from the roof you've lived in for so long is a big one. So when you decide to step away from your biggest income, you have to have some sort of plan for it. Tuca didn't have that in this case, but it still can be perceived as a step in the right direction to become more independent and living life on her own terms. Which leads me to look into career, an occupation undertaken for a significant period of a person's life and with opportunities for progress. A career is considered to be a big part of your life's worth. Being able to say that you have a six-figure job gives you a shot at so many avenues of settling to have a good life, starting a family, owning a home, and many others. Though the definition can be a bit skewed into many directions. One thing about a career is that many people believe that in order for an occupation to be a career, you have to actually enjoy it. Chasing a career just for money's sake doesn't always lead to happiness and could leave you lost in the same cycle. This is a situation that Bertie finds herself in.
I'm ready to break out and step the shit up. I want a promotion.
So, Bertie has plenty of episodes that focus on the topic of pursuing a career. Throughout the entire series, she continues to stack a lot of things on her plate that could easily overwhelm her and in turn begins that never-ending cycle. What portrays that the most is in episode 3 of season 1, The Deli Guy. So for a bit of context, she was able to acquire a promotion within the company she worked with. However, at the end of the day, she realized that acquiring that promotion means that she would be spending much more time at work than at home. Her life has become much more of a routine since she started that job. That was more adamant when she and Speckle fall into the same sequence when they have their intimate moments. Now, having the same schedule for work is one thing, but having that schedule-like feel fall into your personal time with someone can become very old, very fast. I mean, seriously, when you know which specific boob your man touches, that really emphasize how things need to be spiced up in the bedroom. Can I also mention how the nature narration was used to perfection in this scene?
Look close, the female song thrush ripe with anticipation. Oh, so close.
F***ing beautiful. In any case, The continuity of her life is clearly something that overwhelms her, and it puts her own partner in a bit of a pickle, trying to find other means of making things more interesting only to fail miserably, which plants the seeds for other desires to blossom in finding a desirable career path, and access to a dark attraction to Pastry Pete. These desires could lead a person into a lot of complicated paths. For Bertie, starting the path of being a full-time pastry chef could also lead into a difficult situation with her boyfriend of 5 years. It's clear that she has an attraction to Pete and could easily fall into those desires. Her situation emphasizes how these risks could affect not just yourself, but also your relationships with others. That really makes me want to talk about my take on I'm killing it with these segues. Look at me! So I really want to emphasize that when it comes to looking for a committed relationship, it sucks. I haven't dated in like 3 years personally, and to be honest, trying desperately to find the one makes your viewpoint in life a lot more miserable. Seeing other people enjoying that intimacy can be very difficult for a person. So when you do find that significant other who is willing to try things with you, that open vulnerability could force you into doing unwanted things just to please them. You want to impress them. You want to do right by them. You want to earn that right to be that person's significant other. The reason being is because if you lose them, you would feel that you have completely lost your shot in having that person you can really be close to. That doesn't include the pressures that are felt from others based on what they tell you and how other couples act while you're around. Being that third wheel isn't fun, because those thoughts always linger. That situation is something Tuca went through in Season 2, Episode 7, Sleepover.
But we just spent the whole weekend together. Do you expect me to work around your schedule?
I mean, why not? You don't have a job.
Ouch.
So we really get to explore Tuca's relationship life within the second season when she meets Kara for the first time. We were introduced to her in the Nighttime Friend episode. Their relationship built into something strong as Tuca became quickly attached to her. However, this episode is where we actually see how controlling this woman can be. Throughout it, she was very judgmental on how Tuca presents herself. Not to mention how Kara continued to drag Tuca along to spend time with her and only her. When Tuca wanted to spend time with Bertie, Kara showed off her jealousy and disapproval of her being with anyone else, even though the majority of that time has been spent with each other that weekend. The manipulation was already starting when Kara mentions that Tuca shouldn't concern herself with checking her phone when they are together, or how she has no job and should work around her schedule. These points really emphasizes how controlling Kara is within the relationship, which is symbolized when Kara placed these pins on Tuca's fanny pack, leading into the next episode that features how a person can take advantage of one's desperation to keep a relationship.
Well, I mean, it's only 4:15. Tuca's probably another hour away. Oh, wow. There she is, wearing pants?
So in the dance, we see how much of an influence Kara has on Tuca as we see her in her most conservative outfit. Knowing Tuca, she is always the life of the party. She's never known to be on time or tone down her excitement. So seeing this version of her really emphasizes how someone can wrap you around their finger and turn you into someone you're not. When Kara finally arrives, she continues to be judgmental with her passive-aggressive comments towards Tuca's friends, as well as becoming more defensive and territorial when it comes to Tuca's love and attention. It was clear that in order for Tuca to have Kara, she has to give up nearly everything that makes her the person we know. When Bertie shows her concern about their relationship and emphasizes how Tuca needed to stand her own ground in order for her to have a healthy relationship, So when Tuca did express her feelings about Kara's behavior, this was another move that could risk losing everything she worked for to keep their relationship intact. Even though it seemed like Kara would be willing to understand and promise they'll continue to have a relationship where they both have a hand in working it out, it turned out to be a fallacy. This really does an amazing job to show how a same-sex relationship can fall into the same traps as a heterosexual one, and is a prime example of how chasing for that long-term relationship out of desperation can end up hurting you even more. Doing that could lead you to a person that thinks of you far less than what you think of them. Love is very complicated. Trying to chase it could lead you to gloom. So instead, let it come after you for a change. You'll be surprised when it comes to you. When we get older, there are things that we are expected to have when you hit your 20s. The two standards are your own car and your own place. When you hit your 30s, you'll be aiming to get a house, whether by mortgage or by renting. That is easier said than done, as the price of living continues to increase and become more difficult to find affordable, especially when we look at how much wages are given to the average worker comparatively. In order to rent and live a comfortable life, your income has to be at least 3 times the amount of income a month. So if you have an entry job at a fast food restaurant, you're completely out of luck, because a 1-bedroom apartment can be around $1,500 a month in most cases. You have to rely on finding a roommate in order to live somewhat comfortably, which in turn could put you and the person you decide to live with in a situation where your relationship could be affected. A situation Bertie and Speckle had placed themselves in when they decided to go house hunting in the season 1 episode, The Open House.
Dying? Who's dying?
All of us, from the moment we're born.
Wow, true.
30 years?
Now, in this case, the trio took the time to casually go to open houses. The intention was to simply browse and imagine what could be. I feel a lot of couples do this when they have a lot of free time and just want to look into the idea of having a home of their own. Though there are times where if both people within that relationship have decent jobs, it becomes a lot more of a possibility. However, you still need to have a solid plan to make sure everything goes smoothly. The housing industry is full of snakes. Once you sign for that house, you're in it for the long haul. Bertie felt that heavy pressure when she heard the full details within the contract, with a mortgage being tied to a monthly payment for 30 years for this particular house. It obviously is considered a huge step in life. So for Speckle to be very willing to get this house, he really believes this relationship was going to be for life, which you can understand since he has a more positive outlook and their relationship has gone for 5 years. Even though they're not married yet, he still feels very strong for her ever since the two of them met. However, with Bertie, she has a lot of anxiety to name, so it isn't surprising she's being very hesitant when she hears about the 30-year bond to a house and who would get the house if one or both of them died before it gets paid off. That's considered a lifelong commitment. She can't even be confident with what would happen as the day goes on if something concerns her. So this whole idea of getting a home to start a plan of going from one house to another, it can be very overwhelming if you aren't prepared for it. So when talking about certain renovations, there was always an issue Bertie brings out. Even with all the possibilities, she still is very hesitant, and Speckle never pays attention to the signs Bertie was given. Plus, the predatory aspect of mortgaging a home makes the pacing of this episode go incredibly fast, which results in a person's anxiety or drive to do the same. For the drive, it was Speckle as he blew up Bertie's phone, while for the anxiety, that belongs to Bertie, as she intentionally ignores the calls from Speckle until it was too late for them to acquire the house. That action is a ripple effect because of the lack of communication, a big issue throughout the first season. Even with all of that, it's a big step for anyone to get involved in. So you need to take some time to really discuss and truly think that the commitment is worth it in the long run. Which, honestly, I think that's the biggest takeaway for a midlife crisis. I think a lot of these situations and feelings are understandable to have. Each of them may be considered simple on paper. In reality, there is a lot of complications within it that you need to consider. The worst thing you can do is put yourself in a situation that you can't get yourself out of. That's something I've dealt with personally last year. It's why I had the hiatus in the first place. A midlife crisis affected my personal thinking and made me desperate, so I acted on it. How this will affect me in the coming years? Who knows? What I do know is that I will take the time that I do have and use it to continue doing what I enjoy, which is making videos like this, among other things. Thanks for taking the time to see this Bat special, and thanks to the Grapes on Patreon. If you would like a shout out or watch a review a day prior, become a patron. Check out my other socials for updates and real life shenanigans. If you want to see other special topics, click on the video to the left. Click the subscribe and the bell icon to get the latest from me. Until then, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.